Hello and welcome to session 6 of Iowa Ideas Conference. I'm your moderator, Liz Kennedy. I'm the Senior Product Manager of Audience Development here at the Gazette. And this session, Customized Employment, is within the DEI and Economic Development tracks. Our time together this morning will include talking with our expert panelists as well as addressing audience questions. So if you do have a question, please drop it in the Whoba chat and our team will be monitoring that and pass it along. All of our sessions here at Iowa Ideas offer closed captioning and are being recorded for later viewing. So if you missed a session, don't worry, you'll be able to catch it later. In this session, we'll be talking about Iowans who advocate for individualized employment options for persons with disabilities and how this approach is addressing Iowa's continuous workforce challenges. First, we'd like to thank our sponsors, ITC Midwest, Cedar Rapids Bank and Trust, and Inclusive ICR Iowa.
Hi friends, Angelica Vanetta, co-chair of Inclusive ICR. We are a coalition of over 220 employers in Eastern Iowa, all working together to grow the diversity and inclusion of our workforce, to create a space where employees feel a sense of belonging, included, and valued. Inclusive ICR is a proud sponsor of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion track of the Iowa Ideas Conference. As you participate today, be sure to connect with other Inclusive ICR champions, as we'd love to share information with you about our upcoming coalition meetings, projects, and how our work is impacting positive social change in our region. Be sure to visit our website at inclusiveiowa.org for information on upcoming events and to sign up for our e-newsletter. Thank you and have a great conference.
Now I'd like to introduce our panelists. With us today is Teresa Lewis, Executive Director of the ARC of East Central Iowa. And also with us is Chris Peterson, Director of Employment Systems at Systems Unlimited. Welcome, everyone. Let's start by going around the room and sharing your connection to this topic of customized employment. We'll start with you, Teresa.
Good morning, everyone. I'm honored to be here speaking with all of you today. I do have the honor and privilege of working with the ARC of East Central Iowa. We have a variety of services and supports that we provide to individuals with disabilities and their caregivers. Importantly, to this topic, we have a supported employment program that works with individuals doing job coaching, training, support to make sure that they are successful in gaining competitive integrated employment services.
Wonderful. Chris, how about yourself?
Thanks, Liz. Thanks for the invitation and for hosting. I'm happy to be here. My name is Chris. I work for Systems Unlimited, which is a large social service agency with a footprint throughout Eastern Iowa. Systems provides housing, recreational, day program, and vocational supports. My current role is Director of Employment Systems. Our adult day programs and vocational programs serve people mainly in Cedar Rapids and Iowa City areas. I am wearing my hat today of employment. That is where I have really the bulk of my experience over the last 20 years in building small business relationships and supporting individuals who are looking for work. Our current program in the Iowa City and Cedar Rapids area serves about 100 individuals in ongoing job coaching and job search each year. We have about 50 current partnerships with local businesses, and over the last 10 to 15 years, we've worked with probably close to 200 small businesses. So we're grateful for all the partnerships we have and glad to share more today.
Wonderful. All right, well, to kick us off, let's talk about some examples. So Teresa, let's turn to you. Can you share some innovative examples of how your organization has developed these individualized employment options for persons with disabilities?
Sure. So about 6 months ago, we were approached by Iowa Vocational Rehabilitation Services, or VOC Rehab, about a pilot program that they wanted to start in the state of Iowa. So this pilot program is being funded through a Disability Innovation Fund that the state of Iowa received. And it's an evidence-based employment model designed for job candidates who are the most significantly disabled, have not worked or worked only in segregated settings, which means only with others who have a disability, or they had little vocational success. And so through this, we received technical assistance from Griffin Hammond, who's a national organization leading the way in this service, and it's called Customized Discovery. So customized discovery, the approach is about thinking outside the box and discovering a job candidate's skills, strengths, interests through a series of activities. And so, for example, some of the work that we've done, we look at things that they're familiar with or comfortable with, or maybe express some sort of interest in. And then we also take them through some activities of things that maybe they never thought of or would never have expressed interest in until after being exposed to that activity. So some of the work we've done, our coordinator who runs and manages this program currently, she noticed that a job candidate likes to mix things together. So likes to put sugar in coffee, likes to stir it. And so we put together job shadows for that individual to try and get more experience to see if employment in maybe a coffee shop and mixing drinks together is something that maybe they would like to pursue. Another job candidate we saw likes to take things apart and put them back together. He's very creative, and he also likes cars. So we arranged a job shadow at an auto body shop to have him job shadow and also put together some parts of an engine to see if that's really a line of employment option that he would like to do. And then in another situation, we discovered a nonverbal job candidate who had a guitar sitting in his bedroom, and our coordinator asked about it, and this candidate went over and picked it up and began singing and playing. And so we got him guitar lessons, and now he has his own business singing and playing in retirement and day programs across Lynn County. So customized discovery is designed to do exactly what it says, customized, to find activities, tasks, or opportunities for job candidates to thrive in employment settings. And this can be starting their own business, like one of our candidates, or also working with an employer to tailorize or customize a set of job tasks or activities for which a job candidate can be successful. And so we know that there are very standard job descriptions out there. And we also know that sometimes individuals who have different types of disabilities may not be able to do all of those job tasks within a position. And so we really work with employers to try and customize. So this job candidate is very strong in this and very strong in this in your job description. Could you carve this out and create a position specifically for them so they can be successful and still be in that competitive integrated environment? So that's what customized discovery is all about. And people with disabilities are the most underrepresented group in employment, and the group which still receives the most active discrimination in hiring and also in the workplace. And so by allowing employers to see an individual's abilities versus their disabilities, customized discovery opens new doors to employment for those previously seen as unemployable, filling a workforce gap our employers desperately need.
That's excellent. So, Chris, turning to you, how does Systems Unlimited and do its part to tailor employment to meet those unique needs? And had you had some impactful strategies that have worked for your group?
Teresa's explanation and segue is really perfect. I think her background shared the ideas of what customized employment is. Tailoring is individualized, right? So job tryouts, collaboration with families, teams, teachers, interest inventories. It really starts with getting to know that person. So certainly there are formally recommended conversation topics and things like that. And often there are just informal ways of getting to know people in their homes, in the settings where they are most comfortable, going out for coffee with them, getting to know them on an individual basis, their interests, what they like to do, what they're passionate about, and what their interests are. That leads to us learning about their ideas. So they really drive the conversation, and then drive the process. So they help us. We certainly offer ideas, but what we want to hear from them, and our primary goal is asking them what they want. And so further steps after getting to know them and their interests are contacting local employers, but also talking to, again, that person's support team, their family, their friends. What connections do they have? So a lot of the opportunities that we have, some of those are traditional through jobs that might be posted either traditionally or on various online platforms. A lot of the partnerships that we have gained through the years are someone's dad, mom, brother, sister is a manager somewhere, and we have a little bit of a soft contact, and might say to that business, hey, are you familiar with what we do, the potential opportunity here? We open that door and we say, are you open to the idea of someone first maybe doing a shadow, maybe a tryout, something that says to the business, here's an opportunity. We don't have to sign on to something right away. We can step by step work through this, and that gives that business an opportunity to see what could happen, what's available there. And that job tryout, we've heard from a lot of employers through the years just how helpful that is to them and how comfortable that makes them with the process. They get to see a person in an environment where, like any of us, starting something or trying something new, if first you can hear someone say, well, give this a try, see how that goes. And we hear a lot from businesses, I really appreciated having the opportunity to take a look at this. We get back together, we say what went well. It's always, even after doing this for so many years, I'm always surprised by the number of times that business says, you know what, let's do this. And that tryout really opens that door, and they're willing to say, let's do this. And so that's always exciting.
Can you, just to piggyback off of that, can you give us a couple of examples of like maybe some recent job tryouts so people can get an understanding of what types of job types we're talking about? I mean,
so, Teresa, talked a little bit about self-employment, and for us, it could be as simple as probably, to talk about those connections. So recent job seeker, we went to their team. They said, we have a connection at a local hardware store. So we contact them. And again, not really with any grand ideas on our behalf. We keep it simple. We say, here's who we are. Here's who we're working with. Are you familiar with our service? Are you familiar with a similar type of program? Often, in 2023, the cool thing is that they are. This field is still relatively new, but has been around long enough that a lot of local businesses and local employers are aware. And so we'll say, I'd like to introduce someone to you. What do you have available? And so the conversation really starts with talking with someone about their needs. And businesses that are short-staffed, for example, that hardware store says, we're having trouble, making inventory and our stock look good, making sure that our stock is presentable. And so a job tryout is someone who might do some stocking, might do some reshelving, might make the entire store or storefront look improved and look better for customers. And so a tryout can be someone just for a couple of hours a shift, a couple of times a week, trying their hand at stocking and saying, how does this look? How does it go? Again, it's introducing that employer to the idea that we are here for an experience, which we'll say, hey, we'd love it if this works out and you're able to hire someone permanently. But at the very least, it's a win because that individual gains that experience. And that's something that they can list as a resume builder or a referral that they have.
And I agree with everything that Chris is saying too. And I think one of the important pieces to remember is, there are a variety of jobs out there, and we work, and I'm sure Systems Unlimited works to really expand the boundaries. The individuals that we serve are so much more than maybe what was traditionally thought of as employment opportunities for them, right? Being a janitor, or sweeping, or cleaning tables at a restaurant, or stocking shelves, or anything like that. And so we've done some really creative job shadows in the manufacturing arena, working with local manufacturers here in Cedar Rapids, as well as some of the surrounding communities, to see if there are pieces of a job in a manufacturing setting that our individuals might be able to attain. And the great thing about that is that those jobs start at a much higher wage and actually can provide a livable wage to someone if we're able to get them in that. And it starts a career opportunity for them as well, right? So a job shadow might be going into a manufacturing organization and seeing what tasks and what things might fit, and then having that individual try that out for a few days or shadow someone else who's doing it to see if it's something that they can do as well. So, we want to expand those horizons and get people into settings where they can do more, and we need to challenge them to do more. And we need our employers to see that, hey, this is a real integral part of our diversity initiative, is really to get people with different abilities in here, and they can actually do more than maybe we at first anticipated them being able to do.
We did get a question from our audience, and this is a little bit different take on this. So this question from our audience is there funding available for employers adapting positions to allow for an employee to continue in a role and return to work after a personal event causing a disability? So they didn't start with that disability, but it came. When we were discussing before we had this session, when we talk about the overall statistics of persons in Iowa with disabilities is very high. Are there some funding apparatus out there for employers who want to maintain staff that may now be disabled?
I think the top thing that comes to mind, Teresa's mentioned, companies like ours have long-standing partnerships with Voc Rehab. And so local Voc Rehab offices they're an important point of funding and support for us. And so if someone is through a life change, injured, goes through an illness where they might need additional training, Voc Rehab is definitely a potential resource. Working with that individual, all of us who have worked, in government nonprofit services know that process can take a little bit of time, but reaching out and calling a local Voc Rehab office might be a place to start. I don't know if the person is also getting I'm careful to say, when we're talking to businesses, that we are not tax experts by any means, but of course, work opportunity tax credit is available for employers, particularly that service is used with onboarding when someone's starting, in the first year of their employment, credits that are available to businesses. But yes is the short answer. Voc Rehab often, works with people who are in two groups of service, really those people who have a disability that may have started from birth or from a young age. So kind of teaching those skills that someone needs from a young age, or the rehab area where someone through a change needs retraining or support in relearning or learning new skills due to a change in their life.
Yeah, but depending on what type of disability that person has, they may be eligible to receive state funding, which would be Medicaid, and on the waivers, which the waiver service is how Medicaid or how disability services are funded in Iowa and across the country. And so there are opportunities for individuals to receive through their waiver accommodations that they may need. So if somebody needs a wheelchair because they now cannot be as mobile as they need to, they can get that through the waiver. There was also some technology that's available through the waiver as well. So there are a few different options depending on the situation. If someone comes to you seeking employment and needs those accommodations and is already on a waiver, they should have access to what they need to be able to successfully do that job.
And so you mentioned voc rehab, that stands for vocational rehab, and it's a part of Iowa Workforce Development. Is that correct, or is it a different entity?
It's a statewide service, so part of the state of Iowa. So those people working at voc rehab are state of Iowa employees. I will acknowledge that with some of the state reorganization in terms of divisions and teams, I'm actually not sure. Voc rehab has traditionally been an independent entity.
Oh, okay.
I think through the Department of Education, and I think their collaboration with workforce development is very close. And like a lot of state orgs is going through some changes. I'll have to acknowledge that I don't know exactly how the structure works within some of the new things that the state is doing.
Yep, okay. I agree with Chris. Yep.
Well, it'd be interesting to see how the reorganization shakes out. This is a general question. So Iowa does face consistent workforce challenges, both with having enough folks active in the workforce as well as having enough qualified folks in the workforce for the types of jobs that are available. In what ways do you feel that advocating for individualized employment will not only benefit those persons with disabilities, but also contribute positively to the broader landscape of Iowa?
Yeah, I mean, people with disabilities are the largest minority group in the state of Iowa and the largest minority group across the country. So we're talking here in Iowa, roughly about 26% of people identify as having some sort of disability. And that's a huge chunk when you're thinking of workforce issues and open positions that you have. And so it's really, for employers, really thinking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and considering bringing individuals on that may have different abilities. And it's also thinking about really being creative about your positions and reevaluating job descriptions. Do you really need to have something in a job description for a desk job that says you need to be able to lift 50 pounds and walk up and down stairs, right? So there are definitely things that you can do when you're promoting positions that might just, someone with a disability may not even apply because you have that in there. The other thing is also education requirements. It's to really reevaluate the positions that you have and say, do we really need a master's degree for this position? Do we really need a bachelor's degree for this position? What sort of experience can we consider? What sort of life experience can we consider in bringing someone on to fill this position? And then also looking at different ways that you could possibly merge different job duties together to create a position that might fit someone who's coming and wants to be employed, but maybe has barriers and cannot do some of the other tasks and responsibilities of that position. So from an employment end, it's really getting creative, really sitting down and thinking about how can we take advantage of a workforce that's out there that wants to work, and we need people to come work for us. So what can we do to be creative to attract those workers to our organization? Because we know, and all the studies show, that when you have an organization that's diverse, and especially when you bring on people with a disability, employee morale and retention is increased. And so that's what every employer wants, right? They want people to come to them, they want people to stay there. And so really thinking about how can we be a more inclusive organization is really the way to get there.
I may have stolen this one from Liz, I'll admit, in a conversation that we had previously. I had written down some notes, and one thing I had written down was just the idea that when you improve something for one person, you improve for everybody. And I think that really is true. I think this is one of those opportunities that is a true win-win. It can help the business with the nuts and bolts of the business operation, but it helps with that softer side of retention, lifting people up, lifting everybody up. That opportunity for that individual is something that they embrace in a way that maybe your typical job seeker would not. And their interest and their like of being at work, it's palpable. You can see it. And so that like anything, things that aren't good spread, but things that are good spread. And so it's always exciting. It never gets old to go into a site, to talk to that manager, that team, see how things are going, and to see the other people say, and they come up to you and they say, we look forward to them coming, and it changes their outlook, their approach, their day. It makes everybody a better teammate, a better employee.
And I would imagine retention of that employee is pretty strong.
I do my best to look regularly on our Facebook updates on Systems Unlimited, and we have a recent update profiling someone that we have worked with, for an individual who's been working at a couple of businesses for over 20 years. And so they get to know them as well as anybody, that they work with long term. And it is true, especially, in the Iowa City area, where turnover is what it is, right? Due to the college footprint, the college town, and population of employees being one that sometimes does turn over. And you've got employees that we have placed that springboard relationships, especially if that business has other connections, is part of a franchise. It's amazing what one placement can do in terms of kind of a ripple or positive domino effect. And yes, as I look at the partnerships, just in kind of getting ready for our visit today, we have many, that are well over 10 years. So we're always proud of those. And when we go to meet with new businesses, we give them that list. We tell them who's here is who we're working with, and they're proud to work with us. We, as part of our just acknowledgement and award ceremonies, recognize those businesses that are good partners. And so those are awards that those businesses proudly display at their area locations, and they're proud of that. And of course, we're proud of that too.
Yeah, I think it's the same with our supported employment program. We do find that our individuals, when they find a job and they feel it's a great fit, they stay there, and they're hard workers and they're dependable. And the great thing too, I think, as a sell for employers, is that both Systems Unlimited and the ARC offer job coaching. So when you bring somebody on board, they will have a staff with them to assist them in learning how to do the job, learning how to be a part of a team, and really work with them as long as they need to during their shifts, until they know that that individual has really learned the job task, seems to be doing really well, and then have that also conversation with the employer. What do you think? And then we'll stop job shadowing and graduating someone from the program once they do really well. And that's such a rewarding thing for organizations to see, is that someone is thriving in their employment setting and really able to be out there on their own and contribute and feel good about themselves too. So I think that's another good piece for employers to know, that when Systems Unlimited, the ARC, or any other organization that provides disability services comes to you, there is that support. And there's a lot of that support. And we also do some mediation. So if there are issues, we'll come in and sit down and help the employee and the employer kind of resolve whatever issues there are, because we want them to stay employed. And we also want to maintain those relationships with the employers we partner with.
Yeah, it must have to be a long-term relationship, to not only maintain the work, but also challenge that client to continue to expand their skills and abilities.
Absolutely. If an employer has a great experience with one individual and the situation, they're way more likely to bring somebody on for employment than if it doesn't work out so well. And so we try really hard to make sure that that relationship is cultivated and nurtured, and our participants are doing really great and our employers are happy.
Okay, so we've talked a little bit about local partnerships and I'm thinking brick and mortar type partnerships. Given the digital shift with many workplaces due to the pandemic and also due to new emerging technologies, how do you see virtual platforms and technology supporting or maybe challenging these individualized employment options for folks with disabilities?
We're always looking for new opportunities and opening doors. I think that for all of us, the past few years have really forced us to think differently about work, right? And Liz, you mentioned, yes, traditionally the workforce that we're supporting might tend, trend a bit more to the brick and mortar style businesses, but we've definitely placed people in some work from home positions. And those are things that are opening opportunities to the population group that we work with, the job candidates that we're supporting. And we hope that that grows, certainly, because that really does bring up new opportunities that traditionally have been challenging for people for whom transportation might be a barrier. If technology allows them to work from home on behalf of a call center or a funding agency or something, doing follow up to customers to find out what their needs and interests are, or customer service contacts, those are opportunities that we're hoping to grow for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there's a segment of the population that really thrives with the work from home. And so expanding those opportunities to individuals with disabilities is great. I think as an employer who has a hybrid work policy, I think the ongoing challenges are, how do you do great employee engagement for people that work from home all the time? How do you make them feel like they're part of the team and the culture, right? So individuals with disabilities are usually marginalized and isolated. And so we want to make sure that if they're taking a virtual role, that organization has created a culture of inclusion and engagement, so they are not continuing to be isolated as they work in their home environment. So I think that's a challenge for everyone these days, is really, how do you do that? How do you do that successfully?
Absolutely is a challenge for every workplace. I mean, and employee engagement is one of the top trends as far as, improvements needed at all of our businesses. So again, it goes to that, if you make it more accessible for persons with disabilities, you're making your workplace more accessible for everyone. In your experience, this is kind of tied to that. Do you feel like it really can influence that company culture and team dynamics in the workplace when there is more integration of folks with diverse skill sets and disabilities? Maybe what you've seen.
Yeah, I mean, I would say absolutely. And I think, even when you talk about broader diversity, equity, and inclusion for organizations, there really does need to be that buy-in from the top, right? So we can just check off a box that we've, hired someone with a disability, and so now we've, met our DEI quota for the year, and really not create an environment and a culture that's welcoming, that's inclusive, that really makes the team and the organization thrive. So, committing to diversity, equity, inclusion as an employer is really key when you bring anyone who has diverse needs, who maybe looks different or speaks different or is from a different culture. If your organization is not bought into the fact that diversity, equity, and inclusion is the direction that you want to go and what's best for your organization and is going to improve your culture and retention, then it's just a checkbox, and you're probably not going to be able to retain those diverse individuals that you've hired because they don't feel a sense of belonging in your organization. And so when we talk about really moving forward for organizations, be ready, take some steps, really try to figure out what your current culture is, how accepting you are right now, and how you might need to shift and change your organization to be able to be more inclusive of diverse people, to create that really great environment that leads to what we all want, retention and great employee engagement.
I think the important thing is to include them as you would anyone. I think Teresa, something that she said just made me remember there have been times when we have really carefully and thoughtfully advocated, remember to invite this person to the holiday parties, remember to invite them to meetings, whether it's a translator or an interpreter that's available for facilitating communication, make sure that they know what the expectations are. And Teresa mentioned, facilitating or mediating conversations or topics that come up. The importance of evaluations for everybody, right? I mean, we all need that feedback, and that's critical. And that's true for the individuals that we're supporting and working with too. They, like all of us, challenging sometimes to share, hey, here's some things that are going well, but here's some areas of improvement. But integration means let's talk with them as we would anyone else. And whether that's a short-term bump in the road or not, that might lead to long-term growth, asking someone and encouraging them to engage in improvement. And that really is that inclusion of really talking to them as you would anyone else. If an accommodation or a modification is needed, yes, we're there to help with that. But start with the idea that we're going to talk with and train this person and support them as we would anybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sounds like it would be a really important piece, because when you start the process, you're probably thinking about all the positives, but then some of the things that just our traditional management duties come in and you're like, whoa, how do I tackle this? So that support to the employer is probably going to be necessary in addition to the individual. So aligned with that, this is more about that integration. So how do you ensure that employment opportunities really genuinely align with someone's strengths and aspirations rather than just filling a seat? This isn't just a dishwasher role that we're talking about. This is potentially something that's going to be, have some risk involved for the employer.
We talked about the tryout process and the eval process. I think it's a reminder for everyone, all of us, that in employment experience for everybody, cliche time, but it is not a destination. It is a journey. That's a good reminder for all of us that it isn't just, hey, I started here and that's my job and that's it. We as providers and employers, if you're working with us, with anybody, right? But with people with health conditions or disabilities or mental health support needs, going to them regularly and saying, what are your aspirations? What do you want? And that tryout process doesn't have to be just at the beginning. It can be someone saying, hey, I'd like to do something new within the organization. I want to try, I want to learn more. And that's where some of that technology comes in, hopefully, what online trainings or platforms might be available. But I think the important thing is it's a process that's ongoing, and is making sure that we're regularly touching base, and ideally and hopefully that employer touching base again, like they would with anyone, to say, what do you think? What do you like? Is it time for a change? Even for people who stay in new positions, the challenge is, how can I learn more, right? How can I expand? And we would encourage employers to do that, and we would be available to facilitate a new learning opportunity for them.
Yeah, and I'll expand on what Chris said as well, is I think that's the beautiful thing about customized discovery, is that it's really designed, it's designed for those who are most significantly disabled. And so they may be the people that have had the least exposure to different things in the world, especially different employment opportunities for them. And so by going through activities that identify things that are familiar to them and things that they might already enjoy, but then opening up new doors and bringing in and getting them exposed to things that maybe they've never been exposed to, we might really find some hidden talents and hidden loves for someone to explore a career opportunity that they may never have thought of before. And so I think that's the critical thing, is really digging in, getting to know that individual, getting to know who they like, their family, what they've done throughout their life, and then fitting in those experiences for them so that they can really see. There's so much out there and so much is changing now, even for, you think, if you have children, what are their jobs going to look like when they get older, right? With all of the technology and things going virtual. And so it really is exciting to see the process and the journey of someone who most likely has had limited opportunities growing up to really have their eyes opened to a variety of things that they might be able to do that they enjoy. So we're really excited about the opportunity to continue customized discovery and grow that part of our service offering to the individuals that we serve.
Just to stay in line with that, since it is a pilot program, what are some of the measurements that you use for success? So I'm sure it's a grant, you've got your outcomes, right? So what are those outcomes that you're looking for?
Yeah, so it's really employment, and then getting people out of the job coaching piece, because even if they're starting their own venture, like our musician friend, he still has someone go out with him when he is doing his shows. And so the plan is that eventually he will not need that support. And so that's really the goal, right? And Chris, I think you'd agree, that's the goal of supported employment, is not to do forever job coaching for someone, but to really empower them and get them to a point where they can stand on their own and be independent in whatever job opportunity they have. So those are really kind of the measurements for that. And remember, this is a really difficult population. This is a population that was traditionally thought of as unemployable. And so the stakes are even higher for that group, right? Because they most likely experience more barriers to success, need more support. So many of them are either nonverbal or have a significant disability which limits mobility. And so really trying to find opportunities for them needs a creative individual to kind of dig down and then also work with employers. So, success there is really key. And if we can get more individuals into the workforce that are significantly disabled, who may not have had employment opportunities before, then it's just going to be so much better for them, a driver for the economy, and a benefit to employers as well.
Yeah, Teresa talked about that process of what we refer to as fading. So you start with coaching when someone begins a job, and hopefully as that experience goes, what we tell teams, individuals, employers is we want to provide someone with the support that they need to be successful, right? And so we regularly to check in to see how that's going. I think in this field, the social service field, of course, we're looking for those individual success outcomes, and then also those kind of broader aggregate business outcomes as well. I think our people who work with us survey us, challenge us to get that feedback from businesses, right? I mean, there is the feedback from individuals and retention and how they're doing on the job. And then it's also, we're measuring how are we doing? How are our job trainers doing? I mean, we're a partner and available to that business, and so we want to know what can we provide to help someone be successful, how are we doing? And so we want that partnership with that business to grow, be stable. And so part of our feedback is, what can we do for you?
Just a reminder to our audience, if you have questions, please drop them in the Whova chat and we can discuss them. Turning it to barriers. So there's going to be misconceptions, and maybe the employer doesn't have any exposure to working with folks with customized employment. What are some of those that you've encountered, and how have you addressed them? I guess I think of, I work in, as a knowledge worker, I look around my office and I'm wondering, where could this fit in? And I struggle sometimes, especially if I'm thinking of I might have in my mind a misconception of who that client is.
Being on a panel like this is fun because you look back, right? I mean, you think about looking forward, think about where we are, but when you think about, so I've been doing this for almost 24 years now. And, I remember when I started reading assessments, from teachers, from school systems that said this person won't be able to work in the community, right? That idea changed. And I think, it changes locally first, hopefully at broader levels, statewide, nationwide, as the years go on. There has been so much success. And so I think it's important to look back and say we've come a long way. When we meet with employers, we certainly still do hear some hesitation or some knowledge that they might have, maybe of an experience that they had, or their awareness of work settings that were, Teresa mentioned, those work settings that were less integrated than what we're striving for ideally. They have a picture of what works, what makes sense to them. And like always with anybody, I hear that, I understand that, what are your concerns, being aware of that and showing some empathy and understanding to what their thoughts, what their concerns are, listening to them, meeting them where they are, and then saying, hey, can I tell you about this experience, or can I introduce you to another business that we've worked with, or you might know so-and-so from this company. And so always, from kind of a practical on the ground standpoint, it's hopefully connecting someone to someone that they can see that makes sense to them. Any of us, if this works somewhere else, hey, maybe it can work there. And then reminding them of those opportunities of the tryout where someone can come in, or even starting small. I think that was another note written down that I wanted to share. You can make a big difference in this field and the work that we do by doing something small. And that small thing can be a small number of hours that you hire someone for, but it could be a tour. It can be a practice interview. It can be just a conversation. The way any of us, you look back and how are we introduced to the workplace? Well, it was probably through our parents or neighbors or friends, and you start a job that maybe you shouldn't have really been hired for, but someone gave you a chance, to do it 3 hours a week, 5 hours a week. And that's how everybody learns. And so what we want to do is, you break down those walls by just suggesting, here's a door that we can open and here's how we can do that. So.
Yeah, I agree 100% with you, Chris. I think those misconceptions about someone, especially if they're just coming through the door, sending in their resume, and you call them for an interview. And so, it's really about working with your HR team as well. So I'll just give an example. So we had an individual come to us, a young man who's on the autism spectrum, very intelligent, wanted an engineering job and couldn't get hired, and went on many, many interviews and no one would hire him. And so he really wanted us to help him with the interview. And, part of he wasn't able to look people in the eye. He gave really short and concise answers. And so from an HR perspective, for those of you out there, I love you all. It was, okay, I'm not quite sure that this person is going to be a fit for this job or fit for this culture. But working with him and actually going in and sitting through that interview with him, that one interview with that staff sitting there helping him and helping that HR understand this young man, he was hired and now he's thriving in his job. And so I think that when we really take a step back and say, maybe there was an issue there, maybe I should ask some different questions, maybe I should try to engage this person. So from an HR perspective as well, it's really looking at your interview questions and how can you be more accessible and inclusive? How can you expand your thinking about why a person may be presenting a certain way instead of making some assumptions too. So sometimes barriers start right there as soon as a resume or an interview is received and we don't get people the chance to go through the door as well. So
yeah, that right fit is not a great qualification sometimes because it is so subjective. and so open for, frankly, discrimination, but and unconscious bias when we're going through that process. Because if there's no one with a visible disability at your workplace, it's not going to seem like someone with a visible disability fits with that workplace unless you're open to the possibility of changing what right fit means for your workplace. And that all goes down to the HR, policies, as well as what you said, the job descriptions, the basic things that are out there for the public to consume. It needs to be an interpretation of what your organization truly wants to do when it comes to inclusivity, diversity, and inclusion. Yeah. And those are not easy things. They're hard. If it was easy, all of our organizations would do it. So in that vein, we know that employers want to do better. They want to be more inclusive, and they want to also fill these gaps that they have when it comes to workforce needs, especially with our unemployment rate here in Iowa. What advice would you have to give to businesses that are a little hesitant to, or maybe just unsure about diving into this type of an initiative? How do they get started?
I would suggest that, wherever they're located, they reach out to Systems Unlimited, to the ARC of East Central Iowa, and sit down and have a conversation, because I think having a basis of understanding or figuring out how we may be able to work together is really, really important, especially if they haven't hired anyone who has some different abilities or different needs or different skills. So I really encourage you to reach out and learn, and really make intentional decisions that are going to be best for your organization.
Every relationship starts with a small building block, and that can be really what Teresa said. So that conversation doesn't mean that we're signing on to any commitment. It is just that, it's a conversation that might lead to, just recently, we encourage our vocational specialists to have an open mind about what you might find out when you go into that business. A business can support our organizations like us through fundraising opportunities. So, that relationship might start with, recently someone went into a business expecting or kind of hoping, are there job opportunities here? There weren't at that time, but there was a fundraising opportunity available that we worked together on that gained visibility for their business, brought in money for us for a particular garden project that we were working on for individuals in our activity program. And who knows where it'll build from there. And so ask the questions that you're unsure of and that you want to ask. And our expectation would be that our vocational specialists would say, I hear what you're saying. Here are other experiences that we've had. We understand you might have questions, and we'll be there to visit with you along the way.
Now, forgive me, I don't know the answer to this. I was hoping you did. Is there a different minimum wage for folks with certain types of disabilities than there is for the regular population? And is there some potential for that to be changed or altered in the future?
I believe, and Chris probably has a little bit more experience with this, that when there were, and there still are some, but when employment for individuals with disabilities really was primarily in sheltered workshops, is what they used to call them, which was, little tasks and jobs that they gave to individuals with disabilities, and they paid them subpar wages, so lower than minimum wage. There's definitely been a lot of push to move away from that. And so there really aren't as many sheltered workshops anymore. And so we really try to get individuals jobs. And our expectation is that if you're going to pay 20 something person coming in and starting target at $15 an hour, then you're going to hire our individual at target at $15 an hour. So that's our expectation. But then again, Chris might have a lot more history with that and experience with that as well.
Yeah, just a little bit of history there. And I still learn new things about where this process came from. PBS NewsHour actually just had a story about this last week. And historically, that came from those subminimum wages under Fair Labor Standards Act. 14C is the relevant section under FLSA that governed that type of work that came about from soldiers returning from World War II who were looking for certain types of work and wanting to maintain their skills. And so that really became a major part of the field of disabilities and work opportunities. And as work started, 30, 40, 50 years ago, there were some good relationships there, right, with local businesses. What happened was that, like any contracts, it kind of limited obviously the opportunity that people could earn more, but there wasn't that push like there is now to say, what do you want to do? There was some assumption that this was the best setting for you. You're going to work at what was referred to as either a piece rate, which might refer to being paid by the amount of paper that you shred, number of pounds. That's probably the best example that comes up traditionally. We are not providing any sub-minimum wage anymore. We wanted to really focus our outreach on helping individuals find work that they wanted in the community. So the short answer is, nationally, that 14C, it is still legal, still available. States are kind of doing some different things individually. I think the long-term trend, is likely that will eventually sundown and move away, but federally it is still legally. At state levels, it's a bit more individualized.
Mm-hmm. And like with our current workforce, there aren't a lot of folks working at a minimum wage, period. Most businesses are
That's
happy
true.
to pay more. So
that's true.
But I just was curious about that, because when you think of the history, there's just kind of the sheltered work and, the poor farms and different types of locations. We tried to segregate folks with disabilities, but as we integrate them into the workforce, it seems unfair to pay a different wage when you're expecting the same type of work.
I think the other people are saying is there's always, number one is, what does that individual want? Depending on what they want, what their support needs are. Some companies like ours, we look at, what are opportunities that we can build both outside our service center and inside. And even if companies like ours have some small business models where the work might be available at our training center, I think the vision and the key is, what do we pay them? And the expectation should be that even if they're working a small number of hours, we're starting individuals at $12 an hour, no matter the work that they are doing. And so that's just a push that we've made, and we're pleased with that and want to continue that.
All right, we just have 4 minutes left. Any closing thoughts about any reading assignments you'd give us to learn more about this type of employment, or just expand our horizons when it comes to working with folks with disabilities, or just any parting thoughts on how we could integrate more folks into the employment landscape here in Iowa?
I think, I've been on a few different sessions with Iowa Ideas, and I think that, how things have been going in our world lately, it is really important to root yourself in history, to have an understanding of a journey of either a group of people or us as a nation. So I would really encourage you. I think it's still on Netflix for free to watch Crip Camp. And it really gives some good history of people's journey with disabilities and getting rights, not just rights to work, but rights in general. And so I would really highly recommend Crip Camp.
And how do you spell that?
CRIP.
Okay.
CIP.
Okay. I'll check that out. Chris?
I would encourage anybody to, I think those are good thoughts, learning where we were, where we are, where we're going. I think the other thing is, look at the ARC's website, look at Systems website, look at our Facebook, kind of learn about what we're doing in the community and how you can be a partner. And the thing I always leave people with is, just never underestimate, the positive impact you can have with what we talked about, a short visit, a tour, a conversation. I think employers sometimes, you're hiring people who are typically coming in looking for 20, 30, 40 hours a week, and you can make a big difference. Some of the job seekers that we're working with are looking for just a small number of hours. So I think the thing I always leave people with is that you can make a big difference by doing something that might feel small, whether that's, that conversation or a tour or hiring someone for just a small number of hours a week. That's a building block, and that can go a long way.
That's great. Well, just want to thank everyone for attending today for this session for Iowa Ideas. We still have a few more sessions left today, especially our keynote coming up with biotech engineer. So please check those out, and thank you so much for attending. Thank you, Chris and Teresa.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.